You've watched him for 4 seasons straight, sitting in that old recliner, munching on snacks, completely oblivious to the supernatural chaos tearing apart his hometown. Ted Wheeler, the guy who sleeps through monster attacks, misses every major plot development, and somehow manages to be the most clueless person in all of Hawkins. But what if everything you think you know about this seemingly boring suburban dad is about to get flipped upside down? What if Ted Wheeler isn't just comic relief anymore? What if he's actually been positioned for something massive that none of us saw coming?
Here's the thing about the Duffer Brothers. They don't keep characters around for 4 seasons just to waste screen time. Every choice they make serves a purpose, and Ted Wheeler has been quietly hanging around in the background while monsters invaded, portals opened, and his own kids fought interdimensional wars. That's not accidental, that's strategic. And if you think Ted's just going to fade into the background for the final season, you're in for a shock that'll make Vecna's revelations look predictable. I'm about to walk you through exactly why Ted Wheeler is positioned to become one of the most crucial characters in Stranger Things Season 5. We're talking about hidden connections that span back to Season 1, strategic positioning that's been building for years, and clues that suggest his role is about to explode in ways that could change everything. And trust me, once you see what I've uncovered, you'll never look at Ted the same way again. But before we dive deep into the theories, let me blow your mind with something that already happened. Ted Wheeler has literally saved the world before, and nobody even noticed. Picture this. It's Season 2, and Billy Hargrove shows up at the Wheeler house looking for Max. He knocks on the front door, and what happens? Ted's too lazy to get up from his chair. He yells for Karen to answer it instead. Seems like typical Ted behavior, right? Wrong. That moment of laziness triggered a chain reaction that prevented total apocalypse. Because Ted refused to move, Karen answered the door and ended up giving Billy directions to the buyer's house. Billy drives over there, gets into a fight with Steve, and gets knocked unconscious by Max. They could steal his car and use it to reach the tunnel system where they burn out the connections. Those burned tunnels weaken the Mind Flayer just enough for Eleven to close the gate and trap it in the Upside Down. But flip the scenario. What if Ted actually got up and answered the door like a normal person? Billy never gets proper directions, because let's be honest, Ted's not exactly known for his helpfulness. Billy doesn't make it to the buyer's house. Steve doesn't get knocked out. The kids have no way to steal a car and reach the tunnels in time. The tunnel system stays intact. The Mind Flayer overwhelms Hopper and Eleven at the lab. Game over. Ted's complete inability to function like a responsible adult accidentally saved humanity, and he has absolutely no clue. That's not just comedy, that's the universe conspiring to put the right person in the right place at exactly the right moment. And if the Duffer Brothers can make Ted accidentally save the world once, what makes you think they won't do it again on an even bigger scale? Now let's talk about what we actually know about Ted Wheeler, because when you start digging, things get weird fast. We've watched this guy for 4 seasons, and we still have no idea what he does for work.
Think about that. Karen stays home with the kids, which means Ted's job provides enough income to support a family of 5 in a nice suburban house. That's not exactly minimum wage territory. So what does he do that pays well enough to afford that lifestyle, but somehow never gets mentioned? Here's where it gets interesting. Ted knows things he shouldn't know. Back in Season 1, when the boys are discussing Hawkins' lab, Mike drops some serious classified information about government weapons programs aimed at the Soviets, information he learned from his dad. None of the other kids knew those details, only Mike, because Ted told him. How exactly does a random suburban father know specific details about Cold War weapons development happening at a top-secret government facility? And remember when those Hawkins lab officials showed up to interrogate Ted and Karen? Watch his reaction again.
He doesn't act confused or intimidated like most civilians would when government agents appear at their door. Instead, he immediately gets defensive and starts throwing around patriotic rhetoric about keeping the government out of his house. That response feels practiced, like someone who understands exactly how dangerous these people are and knows how to handle them. What if Ted Wheeler isn't some random guy who happened to move to Hawkins? What if his presence in this town was always intentional? His mysteriously stable income, his knowledge of classified government operations, his strategic positioning, and a community built around secret experiments, it all starts to paint a very different picture of who Ted Wheeler really is. But here's where things get truly unsettling, and this theory will make your skin crawl. What if Ted Wheeler is actually the perfect target for something far worse than we've imagined? Think about how Vecna operates. He feeds on trauma, guilt, and unresolved emotional wounds. He hunts for psychological cracks he can exploit to break into someone's mind and take control. But what happens when he encounters someone who doesn't have those cracks? Ted Wheeler is essentially an emotional void.
His entire existence revolves around routine, apathy, and blissful ignorance. He doesn't carry deep trauma or hidden guilt because he's never engaged with life enough to accumulate those wounds. And that's exactly what makes him terrifying as a potential host. A void can be filled completely without resistance. Vecna wouldn't need to torture Ted or put him through elaborate psychological warfare. There are no mental walls to break down, no defenses to overcome. Ted's mind is essentially a blank slate waiting to be written on. And that means possession could happen quickly, cleanly, and completely without anyone noticing until it's far too late. Why would this be strategically perfect for an ultimate evil? Ted has unrestricted access to the Wheeler house, which has become the central hub for every major operation against the Upside Down. He could listen to every plan Mike and Nancy make, sabotage every attempt to fight back, and report every move directly to the enemy without arousing even the slightest suspicion. Because nobody pays attention to Ted anyway.
Even more devastating, possessing Ted wouldn't just give the enemy intelligence, it would be the ultimate psychological weapon against Nancy and Mike. Imagine having to fight your own father, not knowing if the man who raised you is still in there or if he's been completely consumed by something evil. That kind of emotional trauma could shatter the two most crucial fighters standing between Hawkins and total destruction. And if you think Vecna is the final boss we're building toward, think again. The Dungeons & Dragons universe has something far more terrifying than Vecna. Ancient entities that make him look like a powerful but ultimately subordinate pawn. What if everything we've seen so far has been preparation for something that makes the Mind Flare look like child's play? The clues are already there if you know where to look, and Ted Wheeler's positioning in the Wheeler house might be the key to unleashing something that will make every previous season look like a warm-up for the real apocalypse. Remember Will's drawings from the early seasons? Those weren't just random sketches. They were visions of monsters that later appeared in the Upside Down. His artistic abilities became prophetic warnings of what was coming.
Now, fast forward to season 4, and Will creates one final drawing that shows a 3-headed dragon. That's not just any monster from his imagination. That's Tiamat, the ultimate evil entity from Dungeons & Dragons lore that makes Vecna look like a foot soldier. This isn't coincidence. Will's connection to the Upside Down has been giving him glimpses of the final threat this entire time. And that 3-headed dragon represents something far more catastrophic than anything Hawkins has faced. But here's the kicker. If Tiamat is the real endgame, then everything Vecna has been doing serves a higher purpose. He's not the mastermind. He's clearing the board for something infinitely worse. And that's where Ted Wheeler becomes absolutely crucial. If you're an ancient cosmic entity trying to break through into our world, you need the perfect entry point. Not just any random location. You need somewhere strategically significant, somewhere that guarantees maximum psychological damage to your enemies.
The Wheeler house isn't just Mike and Nancy's home base. It's the emotional center of the entire resistance against the Upside Down. Possessing Ted wouldn't just be about gaining intelligence or sabotaging operations. It would be about corrupting the one place that represents safety and family for the people leading the fight. Imagine the horror of Nancy and Mike having to enter their own home, knowing their father might be a vessel for ultimate evil. That level of psychological warfare would break them before the real battle even begins. But there's another angle that's equally terrifying, and it explains why the Duffer Brothers have been building Ted up in the promotional material for Season 5. What if all this theorizing about Ted becoming important is exactly what they want us to think? What if they're setting him up for the classic Duffer Brothers sacrifice play?
Look at the pattern. They take a background character, give them just enough screen time and development to make you care, then brutally kill them off for maximum emotional impact. We saw it with Bob Newby, we saw it with Eddie Munson, and now Ted is getting the spotlight treatment that usually precedes a character's dramatic exit. The recent teaser footage shows Ted in his usual spot, fumbling with the remote when static crashes across the television screen. For just a split second, the Mind Flayer appears on the screen, the same exact shot from Season 1 when Will experienced his chilling vision. Ted misses it completely, of course, but then something happens that he can't ignore. Every magnet on the refrigerator crashes to the floor. That's the same electromagnetic disruption we witnessed when massive portals tore open in previous seasons. The implication is clear. A new gate is opening, and it's happening right there in the Wheeler house, while Ted sits completely defenseless. The teaser ends with Ted looking momentarily concerned at the fallen magnets, but by then it might already be too late. Here's what makes this even more ominous. This teaser connects directly to another promotional piece titled The Vanishing of Holly Wheeler. Ted is sitting in the exact same spot where Nancy and Eleven will later burst through the door carrying weapons.
We've seen glimpses of Nancy in what appears to be a hospital washing blood off her hands while crying. The pieces are falling into place for something devastating happening to the Wheeler family. What if Ted isn't being built up to become a hero or a vessel for evil? What if he's being positioned as the emotional sacrifice that galvanizes everyone else into action? The Duffer Brothers love their gut punch moments, and killing off the most seemingly harmless character in the show would certainly qualify. Think about the impact his death would have. Mike and Nancy would lose their father. Karen would lose her husband. The Wheeler house, the safe haven that's sheltered so many crucial moments, would be forever tainted by tragedy. And the audience would lose the one character who represented normalcy in a world gone completely insane. Ted Wheeler dying would signal that nobody is safe anymore, that the final season isn't holding back, and that the stakes have reached a level where even the most innocent bystanders become casualties.
It would be the Duffer Brothers' way of saying that this time the evil wins something irreplaceable. But maybe that's exactly what they want us to think. Maybe all this speculation about Ted's death is misdirection designed to make his actual role in Season 5 even more shocking. Because here's the thing about Ted Wheeler that we keep overlooking. He's the only major character who hasn't been directly touched by the supernatural events plaguing Hawkins. Mike's been to the Upside Down. Nancy's fought Gemogorgons. Karen's been manipulated by mind-controlled Billy. Even Holly has been exposed to the strange lights and electromagnetic disturbances. But Ted? Ted has remained completely untouched by any of it. He's like a blank slate in a world where everyone else has been marked by trauma and supernatural encounters. What if that untouched status isn't accidental? What if Ted Wheeler has been protected all this time because he's meant for something specific in the final confrontation? Not as a victim, not as a sacrifice, but as someone whose complete normalcy becomes a weapon against forces that feed on corruption and trauma. The supernatural entities we've encountered thrive on fear, guilt, and psychological wounds. They corrupt what's already broken and twist existing darkness into something worse. But what happens when they encounter someone who genuinely has no darkness to twist? What happens when pure, oblivious normalcy meets ultimate evil? Maybe Ted Wheeler's greatest power isn't intelligence or strength or hidden knowledge. Maybe it's his complete inability to be corrupted because there's simply nothing there to corrupt. And maybe that's exactly what Hawkins needs to finally win this war. So there you have it. Ted Wheeler isn't just the guy who falls asleep during monster attacks anymore. Whether he becomes the accidental hero who saves everyone through sheer bumbling luck, the perfect vessel for ultimate evil, or the emotional sacrifice that breaks our hearts, one thing is crystal clear. The Duffer Brothers didn't keep him around for 4 seasons just to waste our time. They've been positioning him for something massive. And season 5 is where all that careful setup finally pays off. Every clue points to Ted being at the center of whatever's coming next. His mysterious job, his knowledge of classified information, his strategic position in the Wheeler house, his complete lack of psychological defenses, it all adds up to a character who's been hiding in plain sight while the real story builds around him. And honestly, that makes him the most unpredictable element in a show that's built its reputation on shocking twists. When season 5 drops and Ted Wheeler finally steps into the spotlight, remember this moment. Remember when everyone thought he was just comic relief, because whether he saves Hawkins or destroys it, Ted Wheeler is about to prove that sometimes the most important person in the room is the one nobody's paying attention to.